I have going back to what I mentioned before. You might have the best tool, the best product, but if you don't, you just want to get into the door, right? You just want to open the door.
Mhm,
Then
mhm.
it's up to you how you present yourself, how you can solve people's problems. So that's why I kind of I talk a little bit more about that now, like whether it's on my LinkedIn or my profiles, just to have that conversation starting. And yes, it's opened a lot of doors for me. Don't get me wrong, but I'm just celebrating something that is unique to myself. That's what I always tell everybody. Everybody has some unique gift. Don't hide it.
We're live, ladies and gentlemen. You're once again welcome to the Kingdoms Podcast and Diary of a CFO. And today I've got with me a very special guest fighting out of the UAE. Make welcome, Lameen Abdul-Malik. How are you, Lameen?
I'm fine, thanks, Ademola. Looking forward to our conversation this afternoon.
Amazing, amazing. My brother from another mother, my brother in another side of the world, I am really, really pumped for this one. I'm pumped for this one, having shared, would I say, common grounds, right? Yeah, so it's amazing. But of course, on the podcast, I always say something that an attitude of gratitude is good attitude. And anytime a person shares a time with you, they're sharing their life with you. Of course, the SI unit promotion life is time. So I love to give people their flowers while they're still alive. So please sit back while I read the carefully crafted introduction. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Kingdoms Podcast and Diary of the CFO. Today's guest is not just a leader with an impressive title, he is someone whose work sits at the intersection of peace, strategy, science, Africa's development, ethical innovation, and human impact. Lameen Abdul-Malik is a Nobel Peace Prize laureate, transformation advisor, and keynote speaker who has spent more than 25 years helping governments, CEOs, and institutions turn ambitious ideas into measurable results. His journey has taken him from the UK government to the International Atomic Energy Agency, from nuclear science for development to Africa-wide transformation projects, from helping establish Zambia's first cancer hospital to launching global innovation initiatives around infectious disease, AI, and sustainability. What makes Lameen's story powerful is not simply the Nobel Peace Prize, it is what he did with the platform afterwards. He has built a body of work around strategic clarity, practical transformation, and his impact framework, which helps leaders move from intention to mastery, planning, action, connection, and transformation. At a time when leaders are overwhelmed by complexity, AI disruption, geopolitical shifts, and pressure to deliver meaningful impact, Lameen brings a rare perspective. He has seen transformation from inside governments, global institutions, boardrooms, startups, and even the coffee shop he once built in Cape Town. This conversation is going to be a masterclass in clarity, courage, credibility, service, and building systems that outlive you. Lameen, it is a real honor to welcome you to the podcast.
Thanks a lot, Adam.
You are welcome. So, before the Nobel Peace Prize, the global advisory work, transformational frameworks, who was Lameen Abdul-Malik growing up? We have a famous Lameen right now, Lameen Yamal,
Yes.
right? But who is Lameen Abdul-Malik?
Yeah, thanks, Ademola. So I actually grew up in Nigeria till I was 12 years old in Lagos. And then I actually started my secondary school in Nigeria. And then after that, my parents actually moved to Austria. So I'll say before all of that, I mean, I had a fantastic childhood growing up in Nigeria. I can't say anything bad about it. And I just thank God for a wonderful time growing up there. I think it shaped a lot about who I was going to become. I knew from a very early age that I love food and taste and being of service. I loved food. I used to go to parties when I was a kid in Nigeria. And the first thing my brother and I would always do is just go and eat the food, jollof fries, plantain. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. But why is that relevant?
Yeah.
And then I moved to England, started studying there and then working there. And I realized that, at university, I was in economics in my final year university. Sometimes I say it's a little bit naive. I was doing international economics. And basically the theory was like, if you play around with a few variables, you actually have a positive impact on people's lives. I thought to myself, that's something I want to do. I want to try and help people to live a much more fulfilling and enriching lives. And if it's so easy as that, why aren't governments in the world doing it? Like, play around with a few variables and you can reduce unemployment. Everybody can have
Independent and
access.
dependent variables.
Exactly. Things like that. So I thought this is what I want to do. So I started off my career actually in the British government in international development, which was great because then I got to look at, working with the World Bank, and I was also part of the team in the UK government that was transforming to create the WTO, the World Trade Organization. So helping developing countries understand very complex trade agreements, which were sadly often miscued. So basically, you would have trade agreements that basically favored, I have to confess, favored the West over developing countries, especially African countries. But oh yes, you should agree to this in the agreement, and it will help you. But deep down, we know it wasn't going to help them. So one of the things we were doing in the British government, actually, a little bit strangely enough, going across some parts of the government, was helping African countries understand complex trade agreements, so we give them the capacity to negotiate on a more fairly playing field. Then after that, I thought I want to work closer with people. So I applied for a job at the International Atomic Energy Agency, which is basically the premier UN organization using nuclear sensor technology for development. So it was a little bit different from what I'd done before, but the main focus was still helping countries enhance their development challenges and address them in a way that would give them a fair playing field to enrich the lives of their population. So that was what I was very attracted to doing that. So, you can use the technology for many things: fighting cancer, food security, even fighting malaria and TB, HIV. So I got that job in 2002, and I was assigned to work in Africa, which I love because I'd been craving working just basically with Africa for many more years. And that, after 3 years of working at the IAEA, we were awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for the promotion of the safe uses of nuclear sensor technology for development. So that's just a summary of how I got there from growing up in Nigeria, being in the UK, and then working at the IAEA in Vienna in 2002.
Interesting. It's interesting how many connecting dots we have as human beings. I was also born in Nigeria, also moved to the UK to work, and you talked about how nuclear power can be used for fighting infectious diseases, for example, your malaria, your TB. I'm going to give you a shocker right now. Right, a lot of people know me for my work with the Big Four accounting firms, but before that, I actually worked in the humanitarian sector. I worked on the
Oh,
Global
wow.
Fund for malaria grants. So,
Okay.
Global
Yeah,
Fund,
Global
Global
Fund, yes.
Fund give grants for malaria, for TB, and for HIV, right? I was on the grant for malaria, right? So like I do very much appreciate people in that, development space. And of course, I think that's one of the reasons why your profile, spoke volumes to me.
Great.
It's such an interesting small world. It's a global village. But like in doing all of this work, it's always very easy to get, sucked into achieving deliverables instead of achieving impact, right? So at what
Yes.
point did you realize that, your work was going to go beyond personal success into systems level impact?
Yeah. It's a good question. So basically, when I was working in the IAEA, so for many years, the UN had basically measured what we call outputs. So outputs are things that are tangible. You can see them, you can feel them. So an output is a report. Let me give you an example. We produced a report to help Nigeria understand its energy power supply. But that's not impact. Output is just something that's tangible. Whereas impact, when you move beyond output, you're looking at something that is not tangible anymore. It's something that's affecting people's behaviors. So what happened when I was working in the UN back then, we adopted something called resource-based management. So resource-based management is where you create a set of tools to create impact and measure impact, and also how you plan it. Basically, we use something called the logical framework matrix. So basically, very summary. Look at the inputs that you you need to create activities. Activities are training, create an output. But after an output, there's two things above that: outcomes and lasting impact. So let me give you a very short example. The Zambia Cancer Hospital, for example, that was my first big project when I joined the IAEA. So how would we use result-based management for that? So the first problem is that Zambia said, we have seen that cancer is beginning to kill a lot of our people in our country, but we don't have a cancer center. So basically, if anybody had cancer in Zambia, they basically died, or unless they were rich enough to go to another country and get treatment. So it's like, okay, if this is a problem, how do you want to address this? This is affecting your population. So if you want a healthier population, which is at the higher level, which is you're creating impact, how do you break that down from planning a project? So the first thing is that you need to have inputs. So the inputs are basically doctors. You send them for training. When they come back for training, the activity is they actually start treating patients. The output is that they say, okay, we now are treating, for example, in the Zambia example is a real example, we're now treating 1,500 patients a year. Before the cancer center, 1,500 patients a year or more basically died. That's it. And in the Africa setup, if a woman gets cancer, it affects not just her, but basically her children in the village. It's a poverty problem. So if you treat at least 1,500 people, that's an output. We haven't created impact yet. But if you give those people, if you treat them, they had no hope of treatment before, you've now given people better lives, that they can go into their community, they can be there for their children, they can be there for the community, and then they're feeding into that community. You're creating an outcome of a healthier village, a healthier city, a healthier country, so that people know that if I have cancer, I know where I can go for treatment. So you're moving towards impact. You're having a healthier population. But we don't stop there, because how do you address the gap of, for example, people retiring or people leaving to go to another country to be a doctor? The idea is you need to build in systems. We talked about systems, building a system that's sustainable. One real-life example is we created in-house training programs in Zambia so they can train a critical mass of people, so that there will always be a critical mass of experts and professionals that can treat cancer for the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years. So that's, just one example of, how you can look at the concept of impact and building systems.
That's amazing. But coming from a quantitative background,
Yeah.
I've always had a problem with impact, right? I love to make impact, but the problem I have is, how do we measure impact? Like, what metrics are appropriate to measure impact? So I'd like for you to educate us, with some of the tips and the tricks from, your UN book, right? Regarding how impact is measured, because I think,
Yeah.
and of course, for us both having background in economics, right, we understand that there are quantitative variables, there are qualitative variables. And a lot of times in the real world, the qualitative variables actually matter more than the quantitative variables. So, like, in what ways do you measure impact?
That's a very good question. In fact, I'm not going to lie to you. This is something that is always caused a lot of tension, definitely in government environments, because government environments are always looking at reporting on quantitative, not qualitative. So go back to the cancer issue in terms of how do we measure impact? How do you measure if someone has a higher quality of life? For example, if you look at, chronic diseases, someone can live to like 60 or 70, but if they're constantly in the hospital every week, yes, you can say most of our population, our life expectancy has moved from 60 to 80. But what's the quality of that 60 to 80 extra 20 years? Was it people spending more time in the hospital? Was that more stress on the roads? Was that more traffic accidents, more stress in the hospital? So the qualitative is like, if we have moved from even from 60 to 70, where people are living longer but better lives, because now the health community is looking at the quality of life, not just the quantity of the life, looking at people who are living to 90 or 100. So it's not an easy discussion. I'll be honest with you. Even when I was working in the UN, the top bosses always be saying, how much have you spent of the money that we gave you for a project? That's nice. It's important. Don't get me wrong. But the idea is, what is the quality of the impact that we've created? So going back to the example of, treating people with cancer, fighting cancer, treating them. if you're giving them a better quality of life, that means that the impact on the economy is going to be better because they're healthier and they can do more. Whereas there's someone that is living longer but is more sick. This is the issue that's now coming, as you know, probably you know, like happening, for example, in the West. So they have high increases of chronic diseases like diabetes, Alzheimer's, and cancer. But then people are spending a lot of time, more time in the hospital, whereas they're not looking that much at qualitative factors, which are a lot more important. And that's why the concept of longevity is now coming on board. It's a big discussion now. Longevity is looking at a lot more the quality. For example, you know, one of the things that measure longevity is,
And biohacking.
Can you play with your grandchildren at 80 years old? You know, if you can't, why can't you play with your grandchild at 80 years old? So is it because you're out of breath? So that means we need to start much earlier, like at 40 or even 30 years old, looking at your health, like in terms of what are you eating? Are you exercising enough? And it now can project, if you start doing consistent exercise, even if it's like 2 or 3 hours a week from 30 years old, you're going to have a much healthier life when you get to 80. Obviously, all things given, you don't get knocked down by a car or something like that, right? So they can
all
now
other
predict
factors
this.
remaining constant.
Exactly, as we always say in economics, right? Yeah, exactly. Everything remaining constant. So I think the concept of longevity is becoming more of a topic now, looking at the quality of life, not just the quantity, not looking at just the amount of years you're living. Because if you're 80 or 90 years old, but you're a burden to your community, you're a burden to your family, for example, they have to feed you 3 times a day, they have to walk you around. Whereas it's vis-a-vis someone who's at 80 who can walk around, get into a car, drive to the supermarket, drive to pick up their grandkids. That's where we want to be moving towards, looking at the quality of life. So again, I'm going to say it's not easy to measure qualitative because still politicians and even CEOs always want to look at the figures, which is more quantitative. So it's always been a tension. I'm not going to lie to you. I even had that tension 15 years at the IAEA. It's always about the quality, quantity, because people love the quantitative measures, not the qualitative.
Yeah, because that is just easy information to consume, right?
Exactly.
But
And it makes people feel better, right?
yes, yes, absolutely, absolutely. But then I think, yeah, there are a lot of, people in C-suite, people in leadership that are listening to this right now. So please, let's do better by ensuring that we place more premium, right? And more priority
Yeah.
on the qualitative factors as
Yeah.
well as the quantitative factors. But, people look
Yeah.
at your profile and this, oh yeah, you can go on. You can go on about it.
I was going to say, we'll probably talk about this later on, but that's one of the reasons why I try to create this concept of the impact framework, looking at some of these questions you've raised. But I guess we'll get onto that later on. So please proceed.
Absolutely, absolutely. People look at your profile and they see Nobel Peace Prize laureate, and I think a lot of people assume that the journey is a linear curve, that the path was smooth. But what part of your journey would you say would surprise people the most?
I think the concept of just believing in yourself and just trying your best and not. So I'll give you 2 stories. So the first story is that when I was at university, I've said this many times. My wife always says, "You always tell people that story," but I said it's important because, my final year at university, I said, okay, I want to go into helping developing countries. And back then, the World Bank was very prominent in terms of that. I said to you, naive, in a naive way, because sometimes I'm not always in line with all the stuff the World Bank does. But back then, being economics, studying in the UK, everybody wants to work for the World Banks. I told my lecturer, he said, "What do you want to do?" I said, "I want to work for the World Bank." And he kind of said, "You can't work for the World Bank. You have to be really intelligent to work for the World Bank." I thought, whatever. But that's an important lesson because a lot of people can get, discouraged from that statement, from someone of authority telling them they're not good enough. But I kind of ignored it. So yes, my path took a bit longer because then I went to work in the UK government. I did not enter at a very high professional level. I'll be honest with you. I entered at a fairly junior level, but because of my education, it was very quick for me to understand things quicker, and I got promoted a couple of times. So the first thing is that no matter what people of authority tell you that you can't do, that's their judgment on you. It's not a judgment on yourself. It's how you respond to that. If you want to prove them wrong or say, no, this is what the path that I want to choose, first thing, go ahead and choose that path. The second thing as well, I think, in terms of how did I move from the UK government to work in the UN? So back then in the UK government, we had grades. So basically, if you're the UK government, it was this grade, UN is this grade. And when I applied to work in the UN, my grade was it was 2 times above my grade in the British government. And I remember my boss saying, she had to write a reference for me. She goes, I'm not sure if I'm comfortable writing a reference for you because this grade is like 2 grades above what you're doing at the moment. Are you sure you can do the job? I said, it should be okay. She wrote a reference for me. And, of course, praise God, I got the job anyway. So I think the 2 things, don't let anybody tell you you're not good enough. Try your best, number one. And the second thing as well is that just believe in yourself and try. I always say you can never win the race if you don't start the race. You got to start somewhere. You never know what doors will open for you. And praise God, everything opened up for me that way. So, if I listened to my lecturer and said, oh, I'm not good enough, I'm just going to get some kind of job working, whatever. And the second note, if I didn't apply for 2 grades above in the UN, and then obviously I would not have gone to the UN, I would not have gone to the IAEA, and we'll probably not be having this conversation today, right?
Exactly. And of course, it's something I always say a lot on the podcast, right? Always believe in yourself. Always believe in yourself. Like, you don't need permission from anybody to chase your dreams. You do not need permission from anybody. Yeah, and I think for people in positions of authority as well, we also need to but careful, right? With our choice of words, especially when, speaking with people that are up and coming, because we don't
Yeah.
know how much psychological effect these words have on people. Like, there are people whose careers have actually literally nosedived because of some of these comments or statements. And there are people who have actually gone on to have amazing careers because somebody believed in them. So I think also on the other side as well, we need to be careful what we tell people.
That's
I'd
true.
rather keep quiet. I'd rather keep quiet than discourage a person. Because even Nelson Mandela said it. If we try, we may fail, but if we don't, we have failed. So you always just have to try.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. That's a very good
I,
quote to live by.
yes, and of course, I love the way you know, framed it pretty nicely. And you know, one thing I've noticed about successful people, I've had definitely more than 200 conversations with successful people around the world, right? It is difficult to be ambitious and to be content at the same time. And that is that's a rare combination that a person like yourself, has been able to acquire. But I'll put you on the spot now. Like, what would you say it is about your early career that taught you about ambition, about humility, and about taking opportunities before you even feel fully ready?
Yeah, I think I've slightly answered that a little bit. So I think in terms of humility, I think it's something that you learn throughout your career. I was reading a book yesterday, just rereading it. It's a book by someone called David Novak, the founder of Yum Foods, which I think is like Pepsi, Lay. And he talked about, um, his book is called How Leaders Learn. And he's got a big chapter there on humility, which resonates a lot with me. And I think with humility, I've been learning that throughout my career because I think one of the things about humility is you have to understand that you can learn from anybody,
Hmm.
even from your children, your child that's 4 or 5 years old, or someone that is maybe even reporting to you 2 or 3 grades below. I think earlier on in my career, I used to even get told off sometimes by my boss because whenever they would praise me and say, "Oh, Lameen, well done," I'd be like, "No, it's we all did it." And like, "No, but you're the one that did it." And I'm like, "No, we all did it." And they get a little bit irritated with me because I was like not accepting the praise. But the thing is that if you're doing something that even if you have to do a report to submit a report to someone, everybody that you need to get the inputs from, they're all part of the process. They're all part of the success, right? That comes from that report. Because without them and you leveraging your expertise or your people skills to get the report and get from them to fill that report, there will be no report. Another lesson that I learned, I think it's in my book. I remember when I used to cover Zimbabwe, and it's in my book specifically this lesson about humility. And there was a really young Zimbabwean guy. And I said to him, it was a time when Zimbabwe was going through a lot of economic problems. A lot of professionals in Zimbabwe were leaving the country. And one of the things that, whether you hate or like him, that Mugabe did was that he made sure that his population was highly educated. At one point, I think Zimbabwe had one literacy rate in the world, 85% literacy, which is very high. So a lot of the experts were leaving. I said to this young guy, "Oh, aren't you going to leave?" And he said, no, he was like 25 or 26. And he said, no, why am I going to leave? If everybody leaves, someone's got to do the job, that I can become the director, right? The good thing is that this guy did a fantastic job because he made one of the authorities in Zimbabwe to become one of the best in Africa within 5 years. So by the time it was early 30, this authority, people from even Europe were like, wow, how did these guys build this authority to this level of competence? And I was like, his vision at such a young age, I was older than him. I mean, I was probably like mid-30s when I was speaking to him. But it was just like the humility he had about, his vision about, I want to do something great for my country. And if everybody leaves, I want to remain behind. I just don't want to think about myself and leave the country when it's going through problems. But, you learn from that. That's an important lesson that I learned as well, about putting other people first instead of yourself all the time. Sometimes it could be a little bit of a detriment to you because you think everybody's moving ahead, everyone's getting promoted.
Yes.
But I think it goes back to our earlier conversation before the podcast, right? About if your success factor is impacting people's lives, then you get to determine your success. I'm very passionate about the concept of don't let people or textbooks or society tell you what success is like. Because if not, you're living someone else's life. You determine success early on in your life, what it is for you, and you chase that success. It doesn't have to be a millionaire or billionaire, but if it's something like, oh, I want to touch 20 people's lives and make sure that even though they become millionaires, I don't care. But I know that I took them from here to here. And you said, that's success for me. Success for me is being the best father, the best mother, where my children can come to me at 40 or 50 years old and hang out with me and say, oh, I love you, Dad, I love you, Mom. Then that's success, right?
Mm. Yeah. So in essence, define your own success. Define what success is to you. And what
Yes,
success is to you is not what success is to another person.
exactly. Because if you chase someone else's life, then you're basically living your life as an imposter. If you say, no, a
Yes.
success for me is to become a CEO of a Fortune 500 company. And then what? If you have a miserable life, you get divorced, your kids don't talk to you, you live in a big house by yourself. And if you look at all the different reports of people, it's true. If you look at the reports, there's a really good book. I remember the author about the top 10 regrets of people in their dying bed. And the top 3 always says, I wish I had spent more time with family. No one ever says, I wish I had spent more time in the office. No one ever said that.
Hi there. Are you a professional or business owner, teaching investors or sharing big ideas, but your presentations just are not keeping up with your vision? That's exactly why I use Gamma app, our proud partners. Gamma is an AI-powered platform that helps you build beautiful decks, documents, and web pages in just minutes. No complicated formatting, no design headaches, just clean, modern presentations that communicate your ideas clearly and professionally. If you want to present like a pro, sign up today using the tool stack link in the description below and start creating smarter with Gamma app.
Whoa! Shots fired.
But
Yeah, that's actually very true. And I think another big major regret is people wishing, I wish I had tried something,
yes,
right? So a lot of people don't end up trying things that would help them achieve their potential or try things that they are genuinely deeply interested in because of
exactly.
what will
Just
people
trying
say.
things. Exactly. Always trying to make your best not to live life of regrets. I mentioned to you earlier on our conversation, I went to Cape Town, opened up a coffee shop. I didn't know anybody in Cape Town. The first 10 months were extremely difficult. I was already a Nobel Peace Prize laureate, praise God. But then I went to this coffee shop. Nobody knew who I was. They didn't care who I was. It was very, very tough. It was very, very tough. And then, of course, there's some lessons learned about how we broke even in 11 months. It's life, right? You just go up and down. And I didn't want to be like, oh, I wish I'd opened up a coffee shop in Cape Town like 20 years later. I tried it out and still to today, it's in fact the lessons that I had in those first 3 years are what prompted me to even write my book. Because a lot of the book is almost like an autobiography merging my coffee shop experience also with my UN experience, and of course coming up with the impact framework as well. But if I never had that experience, no matter how tough it was, I won't be able to
Mm-hmm.
write
Mm-hmm.
anything that's interesting.
Yes, yes. Very, very important, right? I tell people, like, get your hands dirty, try something. Always go for something in your life, right? You might fail at it, but come on, you
Yeah.
learn. And a guest on this podcast gave a nice acronym for failure. He said, to fail is the first attempt in learning. First attempt in
Wow.
learning. That is, yeah,
Wow.
what it is to fail. And yes, it is what it is. Like, you learn, and it's important to take those lessons along the way, with you to become a better person. I think that's actually very
Exactly.
important, because if you don't document the lessons, then it means the adversity was a waste of time.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. If you keep on going back to the failure and not getting your head out of that, then it's detrimental, right?
But speaking of successes, right? I'm trying to be a fly on the wall and see what was really going through your mind, or how you felt. Like, take us back to that moment when you discovered that you were part of that IAEA team that was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. Like, what was
Yeah.
the feeling like? Like, what actually happened?
Yeah, I mean, it's not as glamorous as everybody thinks. I'll be honest with you. So basically, when we got the announcement, so they called a big boardroom meeting. So like a lot of the staff went to a boardroom. And some of the staff didn't even know we're even awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. To be honest with you, right? They said, "Oh, there was an email that went around and said, oh, everybody gather in the boardroom at I don't know, I can't remember the time. Let's say 3 p.m. It's an emergency. Everybody has to be there." So everybody goes to the room. Oh, by the way, we've been awarded, and everybody's like shout. Some people are shouting. Some people are like, because the thing is that, it's not like something that you go for necessarily. It's like you're
Mm-hmm.
just doing
Yeah.
your work, and then someone
Yeah.
recognizes your work globally, globally in terms of using the technology to promote peace and development across the world, which is fantastic. And that recognition has come from this authority, this body. And of course, after the meeting announcement, everybody goes back to their desk and has to do whatever work they're doing, right? So the high was like kind of a little bit short lived, because it's like, okay, business as usual. We've had the 20 minute meeting. Go back to your office now and carry on your work. And I'll be honest with you, I didn't really think that much about it. My sister always tells me off because I didn't even tell her about it for about two. I don't know how she missed it, because it was all over the news. She knows where I was working, right? But she always says, "Oh, my brother didn't tell me that he was awarded Nobel Peace Prize with his colleagues for about 2 or 3 years." And I was like, "But it was on the news. I didn't have to call you and tell you." And I think later on it became a little bit more relevant. I think that the recognition kind of sank in a bit more. Saying, "Oh wow, I was recognized for this global award." And even now, I think it's a lot more prominent. It gets me onto podcast interviews. I even got hired because of that at a think tank, because of my award. And one of the reasons why we broke even, for example, in my coffee shop, was because, and it goes back to something that I always talk about, that I believe that God has created everybody with a unique set of abilities and recognitions and awards. And it's up to you to use that in a humble way, not in an arrogant way, to your advantage, to really live the life that you want to live. But what I mean by that is, for example, when my coffee shop had like 10 customers a day, my wife said to me, "Why don't you tell everybody you have a Nobel Peace Prize?" And I said, "Why? That's irrelevant. I just wanted to come and have coffee and cake, and that's it." And she goes, "No, tell everybody, because you're creating a connection." So I listened to her. One of my first lessons in my book is listen to your wife. So I listened to that, and I put a placard. In the coffee shop, and then I said, "One of us won a Nobel Peace Prize." Of course, people came and said, "Well, why are you guys lying? Nobody won a Nobel Peace Prize in this coffee shop." So I actually had the award. So one of the unique things is that there have been in the past organizations that have been awarded a Nobel Peace Prize before, but the IAEA one is unique because every relevant staff member got an award which we could frame. So we actually have an award which is in my
Wow, the certificate. Wow,
it's
that's
a
amazing.
certificate. Yeah. So I actually had that award, and I had it um mounted, and I put it in the cafe. And when I put that in the cafe, everybody was like, "Oh my god,
Oh, it's true.
this guy's actually telling the truth." And so I used to say my unique selling point was the only coffee shop in the world owned and run by a Nobel Peace Prize laureate. So from then on, we got a lot of attention and people started coming to the coffee shop because I already had the product ready, right? I was already like very fanatic about coffee and cakes, but nobody knew about that. And you're quite good at PR and marketing. So if you can have the best product, but if nobody knows about it, you don't tell anyone about it, no one's going to know about it. So I wanted people to come and taste the coffee and eat my famous cheesecake, but I had to give them a reason to come in above other coffee shops in Cape Town. And that was because it was a Nobel Peace Prize laureate in this coffee shop. And I also served really good coffee and really good cake as well. So that's how we broke even. And the other stories related to that. But the idea was basically, I talk about in the book about a unique customer experience. So moving from a USB to a UCE, because then it's not just about what you're selling anymore. It's about people coming to the coffee shop. People come and want to speak to me and want to take pictures with me. And of course, they'll have coffee as well. So that would help the bottom line. But it was like, oh, I can go meet this famous person in this coffee shop. And of course, then I could sell them coffee, right?
It's amazing, right? Everybody have to, every business has to discover their unique selling point. Of course, that unique customer or user experience. It's actually very important. And of course, I'm grateful that you're bringing it up. But, going back to the impact from my research, I saw that, you guys used a large part of the money, right, of the fund, of the prize money to support Zambia's first cancer hospital. Why did that actually matter? Why did it matter so deeply?
Yeah. So good question. So the prize money, I think, was roughly almost $1 million about that from Nobel Peace Prize committee. And there was a committee in the IAEA that said, okay, we want to do something impactful for Africa. So at that point in time, we had, I think, about 30-something African countries that were member states of IAEA. The most prominent project in Africa was the establishment of Zambia's first cancer hospital. And that because the impact that will create in terms of saving lives. There are lots of projects that you can do, and it might take you 15, 20 years to see an impact. But with a cancer hospital, once the cancer machines are installed, the doctors are trained, you're basically curing someone's life the next day. That's an impact, even if it's one person, right? Okay, they went up to 1,500 patients. It's not something you can say, oh, are we going to save someone's life in 5 years? No, we actually saved someone's life today. Boom. Done, right? So they decide, okay, this is the most prominent project in Africa. Who's managing that project? Lameen Abdul-Malik's managing that project. He has $200,000 with the project. Most of that money went to training oncologists. So oncologists are basically the doctors, the specialism of they're basically cancer doctors. So you can be a medical doctor, but you have to train for another 4 years as an oncologist to be a cancer doctor. And it's very expensive training. It can cost anywhere between $100,000 to $200,000 to train a doctor, actually, in that field. So that money was used for training. Some of the money went to training, I think, an additional 2 doctors to finish their training in cancer. And they went back at the end of the training, and they were very prominent in treating cancer in Zambia.
That is some amazing stuff. And, with recognition comes responsibility.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't realize that. Now you're a Nobel Peace Prize laureate, right? And of course, that comes with a lot of responsibility. But what would you say that experience has taught you about the difference between recognition and responsibility?
Yeah, it's a very good question, actually. I think let's separate these two words. Recognition, I think, is something that comes from outside. Responsibility is something that you take on within yourself. So, for example, you can choose to be a responsible boss, father, mother, child, older sibling, for example. But will people recognize you for that? That's completely out of your hands. So, but the responsibility part is you have to be focused on that all the time. So I think going back to initially what we mentioned earlier on that when my colleagues and I were awarded the Nobel Peace Prize, yes, of course, a lot of people were very jubilant about it, but we still had this responsibility of using the technology for development because the technology can, what we call it, light and dark. If it's used responsibly, that word again, it can cure people, it can bring a lot of benefit, but if it's used wrongly, it can bring a lot of danger. So you have to be responsible in the way you transfer the technology. And it's, of course, globally to be recognized by the Nobel Committee that these people are taking their job in a responsible manner to promote peace and development. We're going to recognize them globally as being awarded the Nobel Peace Prize globally in the world because they're carrying out this responsibility properly. So I think going back to the concept, I think responsibility or being responsible for something is something that you decide you're going to be responsible for, and it can be a longer time. Recognition can maybe just come once or twice. Yes, it can last for many years, but it could something that someone recognizes you today as being, I don't know, top manager for the month, for example, or the top footballer this month. But then if you play badly the next month, people will say you were not responsible in front of goal. Why did we give this guy this recognition last month? Recognition can come in and go out, but I think responsible is something that you have hold on. Like, being in a car, for example, you're very responsible on the road, or something will last, some people are not. But that responsibility is you and how you interact with yourself and the people around you. So I think I like to separate those two things. Being responsible is something that I think should last for the rest of your life. Recognition is out of your hands. So don't chase recognition. Hold on to being responsible for what is within your grasp.
Amazing. Brilliant. So in economics terms, it's safe to say that recognition is an external variable and responsibility is an internal variable.
Yes. Micro and
Okay.
macro.
Okay. Yeah. Interesting stuff, right? So I'm coming to Africa. Africa is it's a different landscape entirely. And interestingly, I interviewed a top 20 futurist, Bronwyn Williams, on the podcast, I think. Yeah, that episode was published in May this year. And we spoke a lot about Africa, the economic potentials. And she brought my attention to something about the fact that Africa is a one of one when it comes to the developmental landscape in the world, right? And the fact that we are different actually exposes us to unique opportunities and unique potentials. And of course, unique strengths, unique weaknesses, unique opportunities, unique threats, if you're doing a SWOT analysis. But
Yeah.
I always love to hear from the horse's mouth, right? You've actually been privileged to work, in nuclear science, diplomacy, development across African countries. What leadership lessons would you say you actually picked up from, these experiences?
Yeah. So yeah, I'm very passionate about Africa, and we'll probably have another conversation just about Africa. So there are a lot of things that I learned. I mean, going back to what I talked about, defining your own success, I think one of the fundamental problems about African development is that we're different and we're trying to develop in a way that Western economies developed. We already have a proven model in Japan and in China, how they developed without using the Western models. So one of my questions I always have is that why is Africa trying to develop in a Western way where the other countries that actually caught up and actually went against the traditional Western economic model, developed on their own terms? So my first question is, we need to find some kind of economic model that's designed for Africa's unique cultural economic landscape. First thing. The second thing that comes to mind when I think about African development is that, I actually gave a training course to African leaders of regulatory infrastructure. So basically going back to the IAEA, when you're transferring nuclear science technology to a country, that country has to have a legal framework and a regulatory body to make sure that technology can be handled in a safe way, because you can't transfer technology that's going to be dangerous. So I was managing a project and looking at the radiation safety infrastructure for Africa. And I designed a project because when I did some analysis of what was happening in Africa is that, yes, we have a rule book that says what you should do, but why are we still having challenges in Africa? So one of the things I said, okay, let's look at leadership. We designed the first project at the IAEA looking at leadership and management competency. So I gave a training course on that. It was a project less than 3 to 4 years. I said, okay, it's not about whether you guys know what to do. It's not about knowledge. It's about how you apply the knowledge to your unique circumstances and context. That's the most important thing. As you know, you can find lots of Africans at the top universities in the world. Harvard, Cambridge. I've met some of them. So it's not about, do we know? We know what to do. That's not the problem. It's about the context and the cultural sensitivity So when we did this course, I talked about, some main principles. I looked at the concept of competency, commitment, leading by example, leading with humility. Now, let me just speak on one of them, competency. So, for example, I said to them, when you're hiring people for particular jobs, do you just hire someone because they're qualified? Or are you also looking at their personality? Now, the personality is important, especially when it comes to regulatory infrastructure. I'll give you an example. If you have someone that, they've got the top PhD in a particular area, great, they're the most qualified. But does that person's character relate to the job? For example, if a mine or hospital, even for X-ray has radiation. If a hospital is not managing an X-ray machine properly, they're basically harming their patients. Now, if I send someone in there to check and say, okay, the X-ray machine should be here, should be there. And if someone that knows, but is very quiet, says, oh, excuse me, sir, can you please move this? That person is qualified, but they're not competent enough. But if you have someone that even just has a basic degree, but they said, you know what? If you don't move that machine now, I'm going to shut you down. Who are they going to listen to? So something very basic. Having the right people doing the right things is very, very important. And also with humility. At the end of the day, everyone is a human. People like to learn from people who are kind to them, who are humble towards them, leading by example. I'm not saying you have to know everything, but at least get the recognition from the people that you're leading, that you respect them and you can promote them. And that goes to the other part of you need to build good leaders. Every leader should be building the next set of leaders. You're not going to last forever. It's impossible. So some of the bad examples that I saw in Africa was this misconception of knowledge is power, which actually really irks me. We had a country, I don't want to name them here, where the guy was very well trained. I said, okay, we're going to design a product. Basically, we're going to give you money to train the next set of leaders. And he refused. Of course, the guy retired. What happened? That country went from where they could treat cancer patients to when the guy retired, they couldn't treat cancer patients for the next 5 to 6 years because it takes 4 years to train a doctor. The guy was just thinking, oh, it's me. It's not about you, it's about the community. So I think one of the things that I learned is that being a little bit more, thinking more about your community. And the sad thing is that if you look at African history was always very community-based. But somewhere along the line, whether it's colonialism or whatever, it became very more self-centered. So going back to this community-based is very, very important, doing things properly. Another story I want to tell you about is, there was a famous story where a Korean delegation went to Kenya. And at the end of the meeting, they asked the Korean delegation, you guys have done so well. Because in the 60s, the GDP of Korea and Kenya was the same. In fact, Nigeria's GDP, I think, if I'm not correct, was even higher than Korea. We fast forward to now, Korea is building nuclear power plants. They build the tallest building in the world. They've got a car industry. And the guy said, the Kenyan minister said to the Korean guy, what are we doing wrong? He said 3 things. Implement. Just do it. You guys have everything. Why aren't you doing it? There's nothing else they can say. There was no advice like, oh, send your people to Oxford, send your people to Harvard. No. It's about just do it. One thing I've learned.
Like he says, just do it.
Exactly. One thing I've learned recently is, I don't know if you're following the Ghanaian economy, but it's one of the best performing economies recently because the current president that came in apparently said, what has he done? All the economists have been telling them what to do. He said, what we should do? Okay, let's do it. So he's been doing a few things, and I think the currency was the best performing currency against the dollar. I think it was like 20 CDs to $1. Now it's 10 CDs to $1. And he centralized a lot of things. So that, it's not about, do we know what to do? Yes, we know what to do. But are we just implementing, just try it out? And going back to what you said about fail, we're not always going to get things right, definitely. But at least we keep on trying. We need to work with the right partners. We need to be a lot more sincere about what we have, believe more in ourselves. Definitely we have everything. Africa has everything, but it's to do with resources, natural wealth. Everything is there. There's nothing, you can't say, Africa could not go up to God on the Day of Judgment and say, we didn't have everything, gave you everything. What else do you need? You have lithium for batteries, you have gold, you have diamond, you have oil, you have the most arable land in the world. You can grow your own food, you have water. Everything is there, but it's just that, sometimes it's a system. I don't want to paint a very pretty picture. Definitely the system also, whether it's to do with politicians, corrupt systems, also hamper a lot as well. Definitely. I don't want to paint a rosy picture, but I think the more you try and try, then things can correct themselves eventually.
A brilliant, brilliant one. And of course, a shout out to John Mahama of Ghana, right? And you actually talked about, the concept of succession planning. And that is something very important in leadership. That's something I always say. There is no success without a successor. But a lot of African leaders do not realize that, right? Your success is incomplete if you do not have a successor or successors to, carry on the legacy. And it's also
Yeah,
interesting how you were indirectly, speaking about the philosophy of this podcast, right? When you were talking about hiring people. And this is something I've spoken on, over and over and over again on the podcast. The philosophy of this podcast is mindset, skill set, tool set, in that order, right? We believe when you're collaborating with anybody, when you're hiring anybody, when any form of collaborations, the first thing to evaluate is the mindset, because mindset is the most difficult thing to teach. You can't teach a person to be
definitely.
hungry. You can't teach a person to be passionate. It's difficult to teach a person to be humble, to be driven, to be determined.
No.
All of those things are difficult to teach a person. But when you get a person with the right mindset, the next thing is the skill set, right? Skill sets can
Mhm.
be taught, right? It's just that
Yeah.
more complex skill sets take a longer period of time to teach, but skill sets can easily be
Yeah.
taught. And then you empower them with the right tool sets. So in that order, mindset is greater than skill set, and skill set is greater than the tool set. But I think in a lot of
Yes.
institutions, we make the mistake of evaluating people's mindset, people's skill sets first. Like, well, this person
Yes.
has a PhD in this, has a master's in that. But if their character is rubbish, how do you work with such an individual?
Exactly. And in
So,
fact, the way you summarized that was it's very relevant. In fact, it relates lots to my impact framework. So intention, the I is actually the mindset. Then M, the mastery, the skill set. Then the PACT is basically the toolkit, right? And in fact, when I first designed, before I wrote my book, I actually designed a course for a university in Morocco. I called it entrepreneurship mindset. That was already on my
interesting.
book actually. And the reason was I said, if you don't have the mindset about believing in yourself to create a business or create anything or your path in life, then it's game over basically, because I can't teach. You have to have that. Without that, then there's nothing else. If you can't jump from that and just say, oh, I want to study, but what are you using it for? And I even said, if I was teaching this course, if you don't believe you have the mindset, then here's your money back, because I can't teach you. You have to believe in yourself. You have to believe that you can do something, and you have to have the determination, that passion to drive. It's like a car without fuel. A car without fuel is not going anywhere. You can't push the car forever. You get exhausted. Mindset, I believe, is really, really important. Fully agree with you on that.
I think, yeah, of course, it's quite interesting. We were having more connecting dots. My very first book is titled The Art of Mastering Entrepreneurship. And also
Great.
I visited Morocco as well. I was in Marrakesh, I was in Agadir, I was in, yeah, a couple of cities around, but I know the major places I
Okay.
did not visit were Rabat and Casablanca. So if you're in Morocco,
Okay.
did you teach that course?
No, actually, the thing is, I actually designed the course, and then with the university, and before I was going to teach it, actually, they ran out of money.
My Moroccan people. I am not
The thing
surprised.
is
I'm
that,
not surprised.
exactly, but the thing is that it was a shame, but what was in a shame, it wasn't in a shame in a way, because that was basically, I didn't know it then, but of course, fast forward 4 years later, that would be I had the material. Being forced in to create that course gave me the material to write my book. So when I was about to finish my book, 30% of it was already ready. I just built around that to do the book, right? But so it was nothing lost from me. It was basically an autobiography of the lessons that I learned from creating my first coffee shop business and then putting that into a course. So for me, it's nothing lost. It's just, I've just
Awesome.
repurposed it in a different way.
I like that. A blessing in disguise. That was a
Yes,
blessing in
exactly.
disguise, really. But
Yes.
wait,
Yeah.
when you look at your days at IAEA, right?
Yeah.
What project would you say gives you the deepest sense of fulfillment?
I mean, I think I probably default a lot to the Zambia project because you could see the impact immediately. And it was the first time, I think, even at the IAEA, we were doing a product like that from usually some countries already had cancer centers. The more advanced African countries had cancer centers like Egypt, Morocco, South Africa, obviously Algeria. So if we were helping them, it would be like enhancing the delivery. Whereas it was the first time we were saying, okay, we're going to actually do from A to Z, like help them from the beginning. And it made us learn different things. For example, when we're building cancer hospital in Zambia, they had to build a bunker. So a bunker is what you need because there's a lot of radiation for cancer machines. So you need to build a wall that's like, I think 6 feet deep. Now, nobody had ever done that in Zambia. A wall 6 foot deep is a very thick wall. Basically, it's what you do when you're building a skyscraper. There was no skyscraper in Lusaka. So we had to fly in civil engineers, actually from Dubai, to help them, to teach the constructors how to build a wall like that. It was a learning curve for us. And from when we did that project, then other countries that came to us and said, oh, I want to have a cancer center. For example, I also worked with Malawi, creating their first cancer hospital as well. So we had kind of a blueprint that we could use to help, especially developing countries, do that. The other projects that were also very important, for example, I fought really hard to have the first plant breeder in Namibia get a PhD. Now, why was that important? Because Namibia, it's a large piece of land, 2 million people, but most of Namibia is actually desert.
Desert.
Exactly. So they didn't have someone even in the whole country. Nobody had a PhD in plant breeding. Now, plant breeding is important because when you look at food security, you need to develop crops that can grow in drought, that are drought tolerant, that are more nutritious, and are higher yielding and use less water. These 4 conditions are very important. And Namibia had a lot of, because it's desert, a lot of drought. And nobody had that science in the whole country. So it wasn't easy for me to fight for that, but I managed to fight to get this first lady to become a PhD. Now, what's happened since then? She went back to the country and she's done a lot of stuff to do with food security in the country. This is almost 15 years ago. She became a PhD in plant breeding, but then it helped the country a lot to develop new crops in drought tolerant areas, so they can grow crops for cattle, for example, or the crops to support other crops, for example. So she's quite prominent, and she's always telling me. I'm humble because she always tells me, even 15 years later, without you, I will never be where I am, and thanks a lot for fighting for me and stuff like that. So when you just touch people's lives, I was just trying to do my job, but then people still remember that about the impact. So, that impact might have taken 10 to 15 years, but then it's still impact because then they can grow other crops in the country that can address food security, for example.
Yeah, interesting stuff. And of course, we've had an episode on the podcast on food security, food sovereignty. So guys, if you want to learn more about food security and food sovereignty, go to the episode with Tony Hunter. That's number 21 ranked futurist in the world. He's a food futurist. So basically that's what he focuses on.
Right.
Yeah. We're doing amazing stuff on the podcast, right?
I'm going to look him up on your podcast.
Okay, thank you. And let's talk about you as a person, right? And something I appreciate about you and your body of work is your upcoming book, right? It's pretty much an autobiography. It is a self-documented, journal and guide for entrepreneurs, right? But a lot of people see the successes, but I don't know about you, but please correct me if you think I'm wrong, right? But for me as a person, I feel like I have learned more from my failures than my successes. And the failures are like a building block for the successes, right? So
Yeah.
when it comes to you, what would you say has been a professional setback that has forced you to rethink how you approach leadership?
I wouldn't say that I haven't experienced, I don't even even the word failure. I think that I'll just call them setbacks. I think for me, what I've done is, in fact, I didn't even notice this. I gave a talk once in Dubai about 4 or 5 years ago. And after the talk, this guy came to me and said to me, I've been analyzing your life for the last how many years? And I see that you're always reinventing yourself. I said, what do you mean? He goes, well, you started off your career in British government in development, and then you challenge yourself going into nuclear science technology. Because I'm not a scientist. People think, oh yeah, you worked at the IAEA, you must be a nuclear scientist. No, I didn't do science even at A level. I don't like science. I only like it from a health perspective. And then you challenge yourself to work in nuclear science technology. Then you quit that and open up a coffee shop. Then you went back to science and technology. Then you left that and moved to a different country and worked for a think tank. Then you become an advisor. Now you're dabbling in AI. Now you're about to write a book. I never thought about it. He goes, you're always moving to a different career where you start at the bottom and move your way up. So I guess from my perspective, it's been about just challenging myself and trying different things, I think. So just the concept of just loving to learn and challenge yourself more. I don't know, is that a setback? Is that a failure? I think we talked about mindset earlier on, right? So that I love the concept of the growth mindset and just challenging yourself, learning. I always think that the life is so rich. So I want to experience as much richness as possible with different cultures, different environments, living in different parts of the world. I find that quite enriching personally. So I think that's why I'm always trying to say, okay, now I need a new challenge. I need to do something differently. So maybe the word is challenging myself and trying to learn different things. I think that's probably how I can explain it. I'm not sure that helps you, but I'll explain.
I do have a good understanding of what you are expressing, because somebody on this podcast, right, has said this about me as well, that okay, he went to university with me. We call him the Sage, right? But his real name is Oluwaseun Ayonshola. Yeah, that is his name. He's a lawyer, did his master's in law, think, yeah, at Oxford. Yeah. So
Okay.
he said something about me. He said, I noticed something about you. You're always muffin. And that's the word he used, muffin. So basically, you're metamorphosing into different things. I knew you from university, as somebody who was going to be an economist. He came out, joined the Big Four, chartered accountant. Now you're a podcaster. All right. So you can see, but the thing is, it's a recurring theme with people who have a philosophy of being a lifelong student, right? You must always keep learning. The day we stop learning is the day we die. So beyond what you have been able to express, I think I understand it on a personal note, right? But to the audience, I would
Yes.
say, right, it's basically about, you know, being a lifelong student and a lifelong curious person, right? When you have that attitude of being a student, you always want to learn, and it will push you into, what I say, exploring new things uh, throughout the course
Yeah.
of your life, right? And of course,
Yeah.
speaking of exploring new things during the course of your life, you did run a coffee shop. And of course,
Yeah.
I think that actually inspired your book, right? I'd like for you to talk about your book, right? And of course, talk about the lessons that, elite institutions could not teach you, but that practical experience of running a coffee shop. And, just to buttress this point, the truth is you cannot learn to be streetwise at Harvard. And I think that's one of the reasons why I chose the kind of MBA program that I did, right? I do have a master's in business administration, but it's not the regular MBA. It's an MBA that was taught by entrepreneurs. Some of my courses were
Oh,
taught
wow.
by the founder of Waze, for example, the founder of Wikipedia, for example, a co-founder of YouTube, right? I loved that experience because you're learning from guys that have built things that are meaningful in the real life, right? And of course, you have also been opportune to build something meaningful. Myself, running a media company, being a guy who has a finance background, it sounds insane, but these are real life experiences, right? So I want
Yeah.
you to touch on the experiences, from building that business, and of course, talk to us about your book. I know you have that book on the desk there, so please educate us.
Yeah. So, even the name and the concept of this book comes from one of your past guys that have been on your podcast, Oleg. So
Oleg Konovalov, amazing.
that's right.
Shout out to Oleg.
A mutual friend introduced us, and Yeah, I had a 1 hour conversation with him, and I told him he just wanted to chat to me about my ambition, my life. So that's what you can learn from anybody. And he's a visionary coach, a top visionary coach. And he said to me, "Oh, I said, I'm thinking about writing a book called Entrepreneurship Mindset. It's about autobiography when I created my first coffee shop, and these are the chapters." And he said to me, "Can I be honest with you?" I said, "Please be honest with me." He goes, "Who's going to read your book? Maybe your friends, family, that's it." He said, "Why don't you merge your experience with," he said 3 things. Merge your experience working in the UN with your coffee shop, because you can't just ignore 15 years of your life working in the UN. What are the lessons learned that are relevant for the UN and your coffee shop? So that got me thinking. Then he said, you have to come up with a framework, because people remember frameworks. He said, I have 2 frameworks. I use them all the time. Then he said, the last thing is try and think of a unique title for the book that nobody else in the world can use. And I think I'm not sure if he suggested it or I came up with it later, and I said to him, well, how about this? He's perfect. I think it's Nobel Peace Prize entrepreneur. He said, nobody else in the world can use a title like that, because they have to have most Nobel Peace Prize still in the science, or they're still working, for example. They're not entrepreneurs, but you've done both. So it got me thinking. So I had to go back and really recalculate my mind and say, oh, what are the lessons learned? And it took me a while. It took me a few months to think about this, but it was good, because I like people to be honest with me and not, make things, butter it up. So in the end, in my book, I already had something called entrepreneurial mindset. I talked about intention, your purpose, skills, the secrets of budgeting, secrets of finance, how to connect with people. So it came up with impact framework, which starts for intention, mastery, planning, action, connection, and transformation. So the book in essence is almost like a semi-autobiography about how the impact framework has been relevant for my career working in the UN and also my coffee shop. So in each chapter, there's going to be a real life example of whether I work in the UN or interacting with a daily customer in the cafe, and how that relates to your purpose, for example. So maybe we just start off the first one, because we talked about it a little bit earlier on. Intention, I believe, is the most important thing. So there's a famous saying, which I put in my book, where the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said, actions are only by intentions. And what I also get from that is that impact is not about scale. It's about purpose. So people say, oh yeah, I want to create impact. I want to touch all this. I want to, have, 500 shops. But what's your intention here? What are you trying to build? What is your legacy? How does that relate to your purpose? And that's why the beginning of the book talks about the concept of ikigai, which I'm sure you've heard about. Ikigai is basically this Japanese concept about
Japanese,
how to live life. Exactly. So what are you good at? What you love, what you can be paid for, what the world needs, basically, how you can be of service to people, what you can be paid for. So I talk about that in the book. That's how the book starts off. Basically, I'm asking the question, who are you and what do you want to live? Or what do you want your legacy to be? And I'm hopeful, and I'm hoping that you want your legacy to be something beyond money and just profit. You want to build a purposeful business that runs after you've left. So it goes back to the concept of building the future leaders, and also building future systems, not a system that falls when you're not in the office, not a system that falls when you're on holiday, for example, a system that keeps on running, keeps on generating impact and purpose for people in the business as well. So that's intention. Mastery is to do with what we talked about. It's like, okay, if you don't have the skill sets, what do you need to learn? So for example, when I got into coffee, I loved coffee, I love food, but I still had to learn about how to make good coffee, how to taste coffee, how to source it, how to, pour latte art, for example. I had to learn all those things, because I thought if I'm going to have something, I have to make sure that I have some kind of mastery in that, because people only follow you, whether you like it or not. No matter how nice you are, if you don't know what you're talking about, you don't have a sense of direction, nobody's going to follow you. Nobody wants to follow someone who doesn't know where they're going. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you have to learn, you have to have exactly. You have to have the basic skills, or whatever you choose to do. You have to understand. You don't have to be the best coder, for example. You set up a coding company, but at least understand what coding is. What are the basic principles of coding, for example? And then planning, action, connection, transformation are basically the tool sets that you need, that, how do you plan properly? How do you interact with the community to plan? And action means taking action. We talked about that earlier on. You have to take action. If you're 60 to 70% ready, take action. Don't wait to 100%. Because if you wait for 100%, you wait forever. Nobody's ever going to be perfectly correct at the beginning. All the tools that we have in our hand, whether it's the iPhone or whatever. Why are we on iPhone, 17?
17.
People forget. Exactly. People forget there was actually iPhone 1 and 2. but people only heard about iPhone 3. They're like, why is iPhone 3? There was iPhone 1 and 2 were actually failures. iPhone 3 was a success. They forget there was 1 and 2. So 3 was the one that basically propelled Apple into this space, right? But iPhone 1 and 2 existed. I met someone that actually had an iPhone 2. And because he collects iPhones. So I said, I didn't know it even existed before iPhone 3. He said, yeah, I have an iPhone 2. So what basically, don't wait till everything is perfect, just start. So that's action. Connection basically means that, we live in whether you like it or not, we live in a globe of 8-point-something billion people. You need to connect with human beings one way or the other. So in the book, I talk about how my customers in the coffee shop, or connect with people who I was working with, whether it's CEOs or agricultural economists in Zimbabwe or in Zambia, going out into the field, into the farm, meeting them, understanding their problems. Because I can't design a product or a solution if I don't meet the people who are going through the problem on a daily basis. I can't just sit in Vienna or New York or Geneva and say, I know what your problem is, I can solve it. No, I have to go and be in the field with them, or be in the hospital with the doctors and say, what are your challenges? What are your daily challenges? If we had give me 3 solutions that I can help solve your problems, then I'll see if I can design it to help you solve that problem. So you've got to connect with people. And of course, transformation is if you work with the right people, you connect with them, you can transform their lives. And it all comes back again to the intention. What was your intention before? Were you trying to have an impact on people's lives, or were you just trying to make yourself look great? And I say in my impact framework, I can't work with you just thinking about yourself. If you're going to commit it, then it's not going to work. Because it's not the tool, it's the mindset, right? It's the intention that makes the thing successful. It's not about saying, oh yeah, here's a tool, take it. It's like, if I give you a hammer to fix a light bulb, you're going to break the light bulb, right? You have to have the right mindset, and the tool only works with the right mindset, not the other way around. I can't give you, there's no hack. There's no say, take this tool, it's going to solve your problem. No, you have to have the right mindset about, I really want to create a purposeful business. I want to build a system in place that outlasts me, and I want to build the next leaders. I want my legacy to be A, B, C, D, and F. I'm not just thinking about myself. I'm thinking about the next 300-400 years. And in fact, that's one of the main difference. You're an economist. I'm not saying it's perfect. One of the main differences when you look at what we call developed economies, and I put that in brackets for a reason, is that they have systems in place that outlast whether it's the current president or head of state. Going back to economics, when I was studying economics, we talked about fair systems. And they said, I still remember the statistics, that if someone commits a crime, I think in Egypt, it takes 3 to 4 years to go through the courts. But in a normal European country, it takes 6 months. Because there's a system of justice in place, right? Why is it taking 3 to 4 years just for a simple crime like stealing someone's money or stealing their wallet? Why does it take 3 or 4 years? If you build a system that's in place, that people trust the system, people buy into the system, and people feed the system. If they don't believe, they will feed the system. That's how people emigrate, right? They emigrate sometimes because they think, I'm going to go to a more fairer system that allows me to make money, look after my kids, look after my family. Whereas I don't want to be in a system that I try and do all this hard work, but I don't get anywhere. So, again, going back to the book, it's about self-autobiography. And I use the impact framework across the book with real life stories, working in the UN, working in the coffee shop. And then each chapter ends actually with an exercise. There's always a 4-question exercise to actually test yourself. I like things to be practical. One of the things that when I work in the UN is that I don't like talking forever, like just having 3 or 4 hour meetings. In fact, I used to have only 30-minute meetings, and I used to avoid meetings as much as possible. So I think it's just a waste of time. Like, okay, what's the problem? What's the solution? Can we solve it in 5 or 10 minutes through an email or whatever? Yes, done. We don't have to spend 2 hours talking about it because the problem hasn't gone away. We just talked about the problem for 2 hours. So that's why in my book, each chapter has a practical exercise for you. It's like, okay, what's your ikigai? What's your ikigai? What is the problem you're facing now? Have you connected with people? Have you spoken to your customers? Have you done a survey, for example? What's the action you're taking in place? Have you done a log frame, for example? I talk about a log frame framework. Do you know what your activities are? How are you going to create impact? What are your outputs? How are you going to measure those things? How are you going to measure your progress? So it's practical from that perspective as well.
Interesting. I love the concept of Ikigai. And of course, I also love the concept of Kaizen, right? Kaizen.
Oh, yes.
Consistently getting better every day. But I'm going to put you on the spot again, right? Because when you transition from being in an institution, right? Especially
before we dive back into today's conversation, I want to share something important.
This episode includes a paid partnership with BetterHelp, a platform designed to make starting therapy easier. I know from my own journey as a leader and entrepreneur that life can sometimes feel overwhelming. There are seasons where stress, uncertainty, and pressure build up, and you need a safe space to process it all. That's where therapy comes in. Therapy isn't only for people facing clinical challenges. It's a space to reflect, grow, and find better ways to manage stress, relationships, and personal goals. It takes courage to seek help, but it's also one of the smartest investments you can make in your mental and emotional well-being. That's why I'm proud to highlight BetterHelp. With BetterHelp, you simply fill out a short questionnaire and get matched with a credentialed therapist in just a couple of days. If the first match doesn't feel like the right fit, you can easily switch therapists at no extra cost until you find someone who truly connects with you. Inside the platform, you'll also find tools like journaling and group sessions on different topics that can support your growth. And with over 7,000 reviews and a 4.5 Trustpilot rating, BetterHelp is a platform you can rely on. So, if you feel like you'd benefit from talking to a therapist, visit betterhelp.com/King Dames. That's betterhelp.com/King Dames to get 10% off your first month of therapy. Once again, this is a paid partnership with BetterHelp, and I encourage you to take that first step if you've been thinking about it. Sometimes the best investment you can make is in yourself.
Yeah.
With institutions that have structures, you have that institutional authority and stability. But then when you're now thrown into entrepreneurship, you're faced with entrepreneurial uncertainty. So what was the hardest
Yes.
part moving from, the institutional stability to entrepreneurial uncertainty?
I think the part is the credibility, because human beings tend to be very risk averse. So if you have an institutional hat on, they kind of listen to you. Whereas if you don't have that hat on, even though you've worked in an institution for many years, you have all the tools, like, but it's not, you don't have that, right? So that's definitely a challenge that I'll be honest with you, I live that on a daily basis. Now, one thing that gives me a little bit of credibility is obviously my award of Nobel Peace Prize. So there was one time, actually, I didn't tell anybody about this, and I actually had a life coach, and I mentioned this problem to him, and he said to me, you have to tell everybody you have this award, not because you're trying to show off, but because it just opens the door, basically. I have, going back to what I mentioned before, you might have the best tool, the best product, but if you don't, you just want to get into the door, right? Just want to open the door. Then it's up to you to how you present yourself, how you can solve people's problems. So that's why I kind of talk a little bit more about that now, like whether it's on my LinkedIn or my profiles, just to have that conversation starting. And yes, it's opened a lot of doors for me, don't get me wrong, but I'm just celebrating something that is unique to myself. That's what I always tell everybody. Everybody has some unique gift. Don't hide it. You never know how you might connect with people with that particular gift. Now, again, that is a challenge I live with. I don't have the IAEA hat anymore. Yes, I do have the toolkit and everything like that. I think one of the ways I try and mitigate that is obviously looking at some of my awards, and then hopefully with the book. So one of the reasons of doing the book, it's not because I want to become an international bestseller and selling 1 million copies. No, it's because I think I can leverage the book in terms of getting more clients and say, okay, well, I have a book. This is my book. Read it or whatever. Look at it. It's showing that an authority that I've amassed over 25 years. And if you like what you see in the book, like the concept of the book, then we can have a conversation of how I can help you and your business, for example. So the book it's one of my business tools to leverage my expertise.
Exactly. And it's great how you're framing it, right? Because even for me as well as a person, I know that leveraging on, would I say, things that are impressive about your profile does open doors for you. In the world of podcasting, for example, podcasting is not related to finance or to consulting, but the fact that I am ex-PwC, ex-KPMG, working with KPMG, the global headquarters in London, has opened a lot of
Yeah.
doors for me, even though what I do right now is not related to consulting.
Yeah.
Yeah, you just have to, paint a good picture of yourself. The good education that I have, having a degree in economics, being a chartered accountant, having a master's in business administration. These things make
Yeah.
people take me seriously,
Yeah.
even though that is not what we are doing business about, right? So
Exactly.
it is very important. But I think also like there's this African mindset of don't let people know about your achievements, right? Because I struggled with these as well, when I first started podcasting, and my mother used to tell me, why would you be bragging about for you being an ex Big Four consultant and you're having an MBA? Does the whole world need to know about it? And then there was this high profile guest that I had, sometime last year. And then the guy was like, oh, I did my research on you. I know you have your MBA. I know you. And then my mom was like, oh, so this is the reason why he do this.
I completely understand, because I think we have two disadvantages. We have the African mentality and also the British concept of not talking about your achievements.
Yes.
Americans are the other end spectrum, right? So, in British thing, if I go to an event,
Conservative.
even if I go to an event and maybe something comes up with my Nobel Peace Prize, what I find is Asians or Africans respond more to that. But if it's a European, they'll kind of look at me, really? Why? Like, how come you have that? It's like a very dismissive, oh, so you think you're special? I'm not saying anything. I didn't do anything. I didn't go out. It's not my life goal to get a Nobel Peace Prize. Don't get me wrong. It's just the work that I was doing was recognized by global authority, and praise God, I have that. So I think it's one of the things that it's a challenge as well that I wouldn't say I've mastered it. I'm still working on that as well.
You need to work with more Americans, because Americans made me realize you have to sell yourself. Yeah.
Exactly.
And it's interesting. I think more than half of the guests that have been on this podcast are actually American.
Okay.
So we're getting that American train. You were going to say something.
No, I said I hope they're having a positive impact on you. So I think with the work that you're also doing in terms of PR, you can't get away from that, because that's what PR is. And I think that you're gonna have to pull yourself a bit more into the limelight with PR.
Yes. That is actually very, very true. Very, very true. And one interesting thing about me is the fact that I very much appreciate contrarian thinking. I think growing up, my mom used to say, oh, like you're just different. If everybody is voting for, say, Donald Trump, for example, you would want to go vote for Bill Clinton. Like that is just the kind of person that I am. I don't like to think within the box. I love to think outside of the box, right? But I think oftentimes it makes people to misunderstand you.
Mm-hmm.
And I link that back to, your work on transformation. So what do you think people misunderstand about the concept of transformation?
Good question. I think from my experience, I think it's just believing a bit more in yourself. Because transformation is it's really the crux really of everything, right? Everything is built on transforming people's lives, or even transforming yourself to be bold enough to live the life that you want to live. I think that's where a lot of people struggle with. So they'll take on the tool skills, they'll learn the extras, they'll learn the extra stuff they need to learn. But if you ask them, is this really what you want? And are you willing to take that step to run a coffee shop or be a painter or start a podcast? People don't want to, they're scared to take that step and transform their lives and other people's lives. And I mean, I go back to this concept of you've probably seen your research about, being a billionaire, or a billionaire is someone that wants to transform 1 billion people's lives. And people always say to me, but how are you going to achieve that? I say, it's not about achieving that. It's about the journey, right? And the idea, it's not about me doing it. It's about inspiring enough people that they do that. If I inspire 1,000 people to impact 1 million people's lives, that's 1 billion already, right? That's the maths, right?
Yeah.
And it's not about me. It's like, even if I created a system today that people say, oh, I love what Lemmy talked about yesterday and I die tomorrow, and I still take up the system and do that. It's not about me patting myself on my back, saying, oh, I inspired 1 billion people's life. Yeah, yeah, yeah. No. If it happens 50 years after I've died, that's
So be it.
it's not, it's so be it. Yeah. It's not about, patting myself on the back. I'm sure you're too young to have kids, but like, when you impact your children, when you have children, you're always thinking about making them better than yourself. You don't want them to be like, then you are the same. You want them to have better jobs. You want them to have better relationships or more fulfilling life. And you start off with your own little family unit. And that, every community is built around family. So get the family right, the community, then the country, then the region, then the world, hopefully. So I think transformation is the most difficult part, and it requires a lot more courage. And, I read something last week. There is no courage without vulnerability. I think it's from Brené Brown. And I think people say, oh no, but if you do a business, how I might fail. Going back to your concept of failing, yes, you might be vulnerable. You might lose this, you might lose that. But even when I had my business, even before I broke even, don't get me wrong, it was very, very difficult. But the lessons that I learned in those 3 years of just packing my family, going to Cape Town, open up a coffee shop, I'm still learning them today. And I'm so grateful that I went through that 3 years. I always tell people I never woke up in the morning. I had to be in my coffee shop every day at 6:30 a.m. That means waking up around 5 a.m. I never woke up in the morning saying I'm going to work.
That's what happens when you love what you do.
Exactly. It was just part of me. It was like extension of myself. It was like waking up in the morning. It was natural for me. Just, you want to wake up every morning, right? So it was like, to have that feeling, I think that feeling is extremely precious. You can't get that in an MBA in Harvard.
Never.
And one of the things as well, we talked about children earlier on, like one of the things that I love is like when I lived in Cape Town, we had some struggles. My children got to see a little bit more poverty. And one of the things that inspired my daughter, said she wanted to study law because she felt that that would be the avenue that she can readdress the wrongs that people in society go through. And that for me was already a success. I got to inspire my daughter to become a lawyer because of just living in Cape Town, even though we went through struggles. I just saw people like in poverty living around us. And then just this hard times that she said, okay, I think this is the profession that I need to do to correct, whether she achieves that or not. The idea is just at least having that intention and having that as a motivating driving force for yourself is really, really important. I think a lot of people lose that concept of purpose. And, today I was listening to another podcast today and they talked about, Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Hierarchy of needs. I love that framework a lot.
Yeah.
I've used it a lot on this podcast.
Yeah, and in fact, you like opposing views, and I actually disagree with that because the highest one is self-fulfillment.
Yeah, self-fulfillment.
And it says if you're going through tough life, you don't care about self-fulfillment. I believe that's the first thing, personally.
Well,
and I think the way that I put I think knowing who you are and living a life of self-fulfillment, I think is the most important thing first. I think if you don't know who you are, you say, oh, I just want to do. I think that should be I started today. I thought to myself,
so you're turning the pyramid upside down. You're turning the pyramid upside down, right? I disagree. I disagree with that, right? Because this is
that's fine.
Yeah, it's a pyramid that I've very much internalized, right? And also not just internalizing it. I think I've sort of like, there are some concepts, there are some theories that don't hold up in real life.
Yeah.
But when you apply a particular theory, across board, across continents, across people, and it still holds up, it still makes sense. Yeah, that's why I love the Abraham Maslow hierarchy of need, right? Because when you think about it, we are above average. We are not average people, yourself, myself. So we cannot measure other people based on the yardstick or the benchmarks for which we measure ourselves, right? Well, so for someone like myself, yourself, we can say, yes, self-fulfillment should be the first. It can make sense. But to the person of, below average IQ, below average education, who is just getting by on the streets, and then you're telling them about self what? Like, are you crazy or something? The first thing they need is the physiological needs. There are certain people that you go to on the streets, like they don't even want to listen to what you have to say. But if you give them money or you give them food, they'll be like, "Oh, yeah, now let's have a conversation." You get it. So
Yes, yeah,
I have just tested that theory over and over again. I discover not for myself, but for people generally, because a lot of times, sometimes you test theories on people, but they don't even
yeah,
know that they're subject of a social experiment.
yeah. Yeah, I think what I would say is, okay, the way you've put it is different because you've said that it depends on where you are in life.
Ye-
I think maybe my halfway point with you is I think all the aspects are relevant, not in a progressive way, but I think they're all relevant at different times. And how many times you plug into it becomes more relevant depending on where you are. So that would be my
Yeah.
halfway point.
Yeah, it's good to agree to disagree, right? Yeah, but the interesting thing, I don't know, like sort of immersed myself into the social sciences. I'm always so happy I studied economics, right? And did courses from psychology, from sociology,
Yeah.
anthropology, political science. But when you think about it, like the social sciences is just, studying social dynamics of human beings in different
Mhm.
settings. When you're doing economics, you're
Yeah.
doing it in financial settings, sociology in social settings, psychology, individual, the study of the mind, political science, that's in
Yeah.
political settings, right? When you now think about it, like really, like being a social scientist is a form of superpower that we don't appreciate.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's something that should be taught a lot more, should be more common. I mean, they're now saying that we teach the concept of entrepreneurship, financial management to children so they understand how it works. Because people say, oh, I don't care about the economy. I don't care about this. The thing is that in reality, it affects everything. Sometimes, sadly, even before you're even born, you might not be born because of someone's social circumstances. So it's relevant across everyone's life, whether they like it or not. The concept of economics, the social sciences, sometimes, it's kind of put to the side ahead of the hard sciences like chemistry, physics, biology. But the social sciences is just as relevant across those sciences as well.
Yes. And I wonder why they try to put it down or make it less prestigious, but it is highly, highly relevant, like totally relevant, right? But like coming back to your body of work, right? From my research, I see that you oftentimes speak about strategic clarity, strategic clarity, but we know that leaders in this age and time still struggle with that. So what would you say is the biggest lie that leaders today tell themselves about strategy? Because there's just too much lies about strategy out there.
We have a strategy. We have a strategy for this. I always say anyone can do a strategy. You can use AI to develop a strategy. A strategy for me is like a nice painting. But again, going back to what I mentioned before, it's not about the strategy. It's about implementing the strategy. It's about doing things, about taking that action, not being scared to fail. Because when you fail, you learn that the strategy was not wrong. The strategy did not bring clarity. So that means something was wrong with the strategy. I think people think, oh, if we have a strategy, they've done most of the work. It's not about that. Last year, I was advising a highly prestigious foundation. We did fantastic strategy for them, everything, plannings, projects, but they were just so scared to take action in implementing the strategy. And I said to them, I have to be honest with you, all the stuff we've done for you is, don't get me wrong, is great work. We've done a lot of research, lots of organizations, successful organizations across the world. But I have to be honest with you, you're going to make mistakes. You will fail, but that's the most important part of this because you're going to learn what works and what does not work. But you have to take action. And they were just so scared to take action because obviously the foundation was a very prestigious foundation and they were scared to upset the head of the foundation. I said, you're not going to create impact without not taking action. We can't there's no such thing as perfection. It's impossible. I can say this is the perfect strategy. I'll be lying to you. I said, this is a strategy to guide you, but you've got to take action. Even though you hired me as an expert, I'm going to tell you now, you are going to make mistakes. You are going to fail. Some of the stuff I've told you that you should do, you're going to do it. And it's going to be like, actually, Lameen was wrong. And that's fine. I'm happy with that because I learned that as well. 15 years working in the UN, I learned different things. Oh yeah, we've got a perfect product. We've planned, we spoke to everybody, the minister, the doctors, the farmers, everything. Something happens on day one. Maybe the minister gets changed. There's no buying. The farmer dies. You can't plan for that. There's no such thing. You've just got to take action. And I think the other thing that I always like the concept of sincere action. Why I like the word sincere? Because I found a lot of things that go wrong in the world. People are just not sincere. They have hidden agendas. And I wish the word sincere was more prominent, across the globe more. Just doing things and really meaning it with integrity. I think that's one of the reasons why I called my company Honest Management initially,
Wow.
because I said people are just tired of being lied to. And people are not stupid. They know when you're lying to them. And the worst thing is when a lie thinks everybody is stupid. That just irritates everybody else. So obviously, doing things with sincerity, with integrity, working with the right people to create the right impact. I really believe that if you do that, and with faith and perseverance, there will be some form of success. It might not be making $1 billion, but if you make half of that and really impact people's lives, who you're working with, then that's going to be the lasting success. I really believe that.
Interested. But a lot of leaders will disagree with you on things, right? But what is
Yeah.
one belief that you hold about leadership that many current crop of leaders still disagree with you on?
Well, I listened to a lot of, especially what's happening globally. I think globally we're in a really interesting situation. And I've listened to some of these talks of people, and there is still a common thread. Whether these leaders disagree or not, but a lot of people are now saying that they're really worried about the current bunch of leaders for one main reason. They don't care about the people they lead anymore. Lots of podcasts and interviews, they're all saying, and they're criticizing the people the highest people who are leading the top countries in the world. People are saying that's what scares them the most. They said 20 or 30 years ago, leaders actually had some kind of, I care about my population, I call my electorate. They said now we're entering a phase where leaders, they only care about themselves. They really don't care about anybody else apart from themselves. And that's the most dangerous because they're completely, purely selfish and egotistical. And it can never be any success. You can disagree with me, any leader. I can challenge any leader. If you're just focusing on yourself, egotistical, then it's game over. Because if once you engage the ego, it's over.
Yeah.
You only see yourself. You don't see anybody else. And I think that's the thing that scares me a lot about what's happening in the world now. They don't care about it apart from themselves. It started to happen in business. I met an ex-McKinsey guy who actually quit his job because of this. He was working at McKinsey for many, many years, always working with the top CEOs, and he realized after about 5-10 years, he was like, he'd go speak to a CEO, solve their problem. This is going to be good for you, good for your staff. And he said all the leaders were consistent. They were like, my staff, I don't care about them. I care about myself and the shareholders and my pay packet.
Bottom line.
And he quit because of exactly. He quit because of that. Because he could no longer, his conscience was just, he couldn't do it anymore with his conscience. He was like, I can't help these people that don't care about the people. They don't care if someone loses their job or can't feed their family. They really don't care. He was like, I can't do this anymore. His conscience is caught up with him.
Right.
And I think now we're seeing that politically, that's what's happened. That's why we have problems in the world. So any leader, I'm willing to challenge them on that. And when you ask a few questions after a while, you can find out. It's not that difficult to find out if someone is focusing on themselves. It's not that difficult. 4 or 5 questions, you'll find out.
Boom. The answers come out. I remember at PwC, they taught us, they say, always ask probing questions. Probing questions. Probing open-ended questions. When you ask probing open-ended questions, those leaders reveal themselves. They reveal who they really are. And do you agree or disagree?
Yeah, I'm sure you can relate, and I'm sure there's a part of you that agrees with me. Maybe you can't see that because you're the interviewer, but I think
I'm very authentic. I can very much relate. Also myself having a Big Four background, I was privileged to have worked with a lot of business leaders, and it will shock you the kind of mentality that a lot of business leaders actually have. You might not be able to stomach it. So I have my own fair share of experience
Yeah.
of business leaders that care just about the bottom line, and it's crazy how people are just like numbers to such people. They only see numbers. They don't see people. But I wish them good luck. I wish them good luck.
I'm kind of a bit of an optimist. I think that like some of the things I've seen in the next generation, like Generation Z or Z, I think some of them are beginning to question a lot of things that we and my
Yes.
parents took for granted. I'm just saying, actually, no, I don't want to work for company X for the next 30 years until retirement. I want to do this. And then after that, I'm going to open up a coffee shop or a bakery. I want to live a life of purpose. So I like to deter on the concept of optimism, not pessimism, hope. I think it's inconsistent for this concept of egotistical leadership to last forever. I think there'll be a time where people like, actually, no, we don't want a world like this. We want to redress this. So I'm optimistic about that.
Yes, and of course, shout out to Gen Z and Gen Alpha. I think they are beginning to question the status quo. They are beginning to question the status quo. And of course, we know no king reigns forever, right? There's no king that reigns
Yeah.
forever. So yeah, things will
Yes.
definitely reshuffle over time. But
Yeah.
you spoke about executing strategy, right? Why do you think a lot of intelligent leaders, even today, still fail at executing, good ideas, good strategies? Like what's the common cause, or what are the common causes?
Yeah. I think sometimes there's obviously a fear of who they believe their stakeholders are. So, for example, if you're one of these Fortune 500 companies that are looking at the concept of shareholders, so you're worried about your job, you're worried about paying dividends. So people tend to be a lot risk averse, not taking the right action, not standing behind and protecting the people they manage. I always say that it's one of my questions, so I'm asking questions now. It always bothers me where CEOs are selected by shareholders, and that's the problem, because they're selecting a CEO that's going to maximize dividends. But the staff that they manage, the people's lives that they're going to have an impact on, they don't get a say. So I would like to advocate for where CEOs actually get elected by the staff, not just by shareholders, right? Or by the market. What makes Wall Street happy? This new CEO that's going to give us more dividends. But what about the concept of what, initially we had stakeholder capitalism, not just the shareholders, but the people, the community, the environment. Now we have ESG, but that's been kind of a bit muffled in a little bit. But looking at the people that you're impacting on, I think that if you have CEOs that kind of get elected by the staff, then they will know who their constituents is, and then they will respond to making sure that they maximize the company that benefits the staff. And when you benefit the staff, people have said it before, I'm not sure if it's Richard Branson, if you want to treat your customers right, treat your staff right. We see this in service industries a lot. You can go to a coffee shop, the waiter has been shouted at by the boss, and they take it out on the customer, right? Or they're not smiling. I think if we move to that concept, then people feel valued. Every human being just wants to feel valued, right? If they feel valued, they're going to give more than 100%. They'll work the extra hours. They'll do whatever you tell them. If they feel valued, respected, and honored, most human beings will give 100%. They'll even give you more. You even have to ask them, can you stay an extra hour? They'll be like, extra hour? I'll do an extra 2 hours for you. Not a problem. So I think if we move towards that concept globally, I think that we'll have a big shift in communities and the world. I believe that. I think if you value every human being, every human being, from when you're a child, what does a child say at the beginning? Mommy, Daddy, see what I'm doing? Look, I scored. Oh, look, I got an A. Because at that moment in time, the most authoritative figure in a child's life is the parents. So they want to please the authority figure. They want recognition. But when we get older, it's like, yeah, exactly, validation. It's a general. You did psychology. It's simple. It's really simple. It's not complicated. It's very simple. It's very simple. To motivate a human being is not that difficult. But you can't motivate them. It's not. It's really, people think of motivate them with fear. Fear is not going to last forever. It's not going to last forever. No human being wants to live. Yeah.
That's interesting. We had Lance Secretan on the podcast recently. He is an ex-Fortune 100 CEO, and he spoke about fear-based leadership and love-based leadership, right? So he is like, most leaders utilize fear to motivate, right? However, the right thing to do is to inspire. So when you inspire
Exactly.
people, you get, better outcomes, and inspiration is born out of love. not out of fear. But
Yeah.
also, I think touching back on your concept of having the CEO elected by the staff members, right? It got me thinking a little bit, right? How about having staff members also be shareholders, right? What kind of impact do
Hmm.
you think that would have on the business? Because there are businesses that, give out share options, right? Like put your money where your mouth is, be heavily invested in what you're working or who you're working with. That way, it sort of makes you feel like you have skin in the game.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
I think that's one of, I know I've not much research in this area, but I know that when Starbucks started, the founder did that. Basically, that's why they did not call them employees. They call them not shareholders. There was a terminology they used. They didn't call them employees. Basically, everybody had a stake in the business, right? So everybody was responsible for the success of the business. And I think share options is also good. Doesn't always work. I think it also, the human touch sometimes is missed out because I know people that they can't stand their boss. They just can't wait to quit and cash their share options. So it hasn't worked from a motivating aspect because they've still missed out the human element. Yes, they will put in the work. The company's now worth, I don't know, it was 3 years ago, it was worth 10 million. Now it's worth 100 million. So I can't wait to cash out and get out of this place.
cash out, get out. Interesting.
Yeah.
So,
I think it goes back to what you said, your former podcast, the person that was in your podcast before, the love-based inspiration. I think it also goes back to something you mentioned earlier on in our talk, empowerment. I really love the concept of empowerment because empowerment also is from trust, right? Every human being wants to feel like they're trusted. And I think when you empower people and say, okay, I trust you to do this, I'm going to empower you to come up with this great idea, go and do it. They will give over 100% for that. So I love that concept as well of empowerment, empowering people to do better things. And I think it's something that I would love to see more empowerment given to the youth. Some people are like, oh no, you're too young. We're experienced, we know. But I think empowerment, part of empowerment is power, right? So and power and energy is more common when you're younger than when you're older. So empowering people, giving them the power to think and to be part of the solution, not the problem, I think is really important to concept as well.
I appreciate that. And of course, just to, buttress on that point, empowerment entails empowering people with the right skills, sets
Yeah.
and the right tool sets. Yeah, very, very, very important. But, like a lot of organizations love to copy. They love to copy frameworks from,
Yeah.
bigger organizations.
Yeah.
But it leads to a situation where a lot of these organizations do not understand the context. There is content and there is context. So I'd like for you to speak to, the concept of organizations copying, successful, market leaders in terms of frameworks, right? So you have been in entrepreneurship and you know fully well it doesn't take long for you to realize that, copying another person's framework will not necessarily work for you. So what's your advice to leaders in today's time?
Yeah. I think also, before context, there's pretext. So, and pretext is basically looking at the existing situation before you look at the context. I don't know if that makes sense. So, we talked earlier on about economic models. So where there's the Western economic model, but it did not work for Asia because they're different people. If you look at China, China's had an empire for 3,000 years, or Persia or Iran. They have history, and that history is in their genes, in their mentality. Someone that's been around for 100 years cannot tell someone that has a history of 3,000 years what to do. They will take some relevant bits, but they're like, well, maybe we tried this 1,000 years ago, it didn't work, it's not going to work for us now. So it's looking at that concept of pretext and context, saying what is going to be the best thing for us. So, copying is very easy, and it's really fun that people just copy because, in school, if you copy from someone, you fail. But people would say, oh, I'll copy that person.
Copy and
Now,
paste.
exactly. Don't get me wrong. There have been successful models that people have copied, but I believe those models have worked because they've looked at the main elements and they've adapted it to their context, for example. So it's not about, let's look at smartphones, for example. When Apple came out with a smartphone, the best phone back then was the BlackBerry. They were selling 3 or 4 times more than an Apple phone. And BlackBerry were like, Apple's never going to reach us. We're way ahead of them. They got a bit complacent. That's we know the history is written, history is written on that one. But then you have other phones like Samsung or whatever. Now, people say there's sometimes, I don't own a Samsung, but I say if you're looking at phones, technically, Samsung is better than an iPhone.
So I keep
But
hearing.
if you look at the concept of the iPhone or Apple, they never advertise their features. They don't say, oh, we have this chip and that. Their marketing is completely different. They're looking at the concept of thinking differently. That's why they first advertised think differently, because they were challenging the status quo of, going back to what your mum said, why are we going to be like everybody else? We don't want to be like everybody else. But that way, Apple did, it was psychology, because no matter what, every human being doesn't want to be like everybody else. They always want to be unique, right?
Are you sure?
Right?
Some people want to be like you.
What I mean by that is that, so it's like, okay, you can learn certain things that I do. So on this, our conversation for almost 2 hours, where I've shared some things. I've talked about my impact framework, why I want to help people based on my experience, but it still has to bring in your own context. For example, right? Like I had a coffee shop. Yes, it was successful for what I did, but someone can say, yeah, but you're not like Starbucks. Why should I listen to you? I'm not telling you to build a business like Starbucks. I'm telling you to build a purposeful business that's in line with your legacy and how you want to live your world. Whether it's coffee or a podcast, for example, it could be something different. The idea is to live a business that aligns with your purpose and yourself fulfilling the world. That's basically what I'm trying to teach you through my book, and I'm living my life experience. It's not something that's abstract. It's like every lesson that I've been through, whether working with a massive organization or with 2 or 3 people. So I think that going back to what I said is like, even when I talk about African development, I always say, coming to Africa, there's lessons we can learn from America, from UK, or whatever, China, but then apply it to the context of Africa. Don't copy and paste, because it's never going to work. Even if you have all the money, it's not going to work. And there's so many examples of, people that have tried to copy. Oh, I had the money, and they fail completely because they didn't have the right context and did not apply the pretext before as well. So they did not look at what they had, what was existing, what was not going to work, or what's going to fail, for example. For example, I always use this concept, like, obviously you've been to Nigeria many times. Will a Lamborghini work in some parts of Nigeria? No, because
With a
the
bad
roads.
road.
No, yes, exactly. Some people many years ago, I think in the 90s, they bought Lamborghinis to take to Nigeria. But then what happened after a while? They couldn't drive them because it's not relevant. It doesn't work there. Whether you like it or it doesn't work there. It works with a nice flat road that has, I don't know how many kilometers where you can test it. Now, going back to another context, if you look at Singapore apparently is one of the most expensive places to buy a Ferrari, and you can't drive more than, I think, 60 kilometers an hour. But people buy Ferraris. Why? Because it's a status symbol. It does not make any economic sense to have a Ferrari in Singapore. First of all, it costs 10 times the price or whatever. I think the tax for a car is I think a Toyota Corolla in Singapore costs the same as a Mercedes E-Class in Germany because of the tax. So I think, again, just what I was saying, like, when I talk about African development, it's like, okay, let's learn from the other parts of the world, but let's apply it to what is the African DNA, because whether we like it or not, Africans are different. And once we understand that, then we will thrive as a continent.
Interesting. So before we let you go, we want you to address the elephant in the room, which is AI. Speaking of AI, innovation, and the future of leadership, right? What do you see AI really doing, right? Like, what's the role of AI in terms of, the innovation and also leadership strategy going forward, say, for the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah. So one of the things I've talked about before is that I believe that AI should be renamed assisted intelligence. Because I always say no one likes anything that's artificial. So why are you calling it artificial intelligence? But what I mean by assisted intelligence is that I think its main place is to assist us as human beings to do certain things. So like a handy advisor, a handy assistant to do some work. So I'll be honest with you, if I need to do a presentation, I used to use PowerPoint, but before it could take me 2 or 3 hours to work on PowerPoint, right? But now I can write everything in Word and then I could upload it to an AI tool like Gamma and it could do my presentation for me. I can just get different prompts. So I can save 2 hours. I can work on something else. So I believe that, one of the challenges with AI moving forward is that it's like a tool, like when we had calculators. I think it becomes dangerous when the concept of ethics are being misused or not addressed. What I mean by that is when people start to say, I now want this tool to replace human connection I don't need to hire this many people anymore. One of the questions that's come along in other podcasts I've listened to is that someone said, I've been thinking about this. What if we have AI that replaces everybody? Who's gonna have money to buy what the AI is making?
Oh, that's a great question. I like that. I like that perspective.
My wife was saying the other day, like, okay, I know maybe it's a man thing. Like, why are we having driverless cars? For what? There's not people in the world that want to drive the car for you, right? So you're going to have driverless cars and then people, they drive cars, they don't have jobs anymore. So you get into the car, it's driverless. What's the point of this? So I think in summary, there's a lot of noise around AI. I think I see the benefit in terms of assisting us. I think in terms of data mining is great. Let's look at health sector. For example, they now have tested some tools with AI where it can analyze certain types of tumors, for example, certain types of cancers. I can say, okay, based on 20,000 people's data, this is the most optimal way to cure this person. That's fantastic. You can use AI for that. So it gives the doctor the tool to say, I was going to cut here or I was going to use this, but based on the data, no, I'm going to cut here instead. And I'm going to use this treatment protocol instead of this because out of the 20,000 patients we analyzed, 99% of people survived. That's perfect to use AI for that, right? It's giving you precise data across different genomics, for example, across different racial divides. Say this worked with, whether it's an African, but it's not going to work with a Caucasian. We already know that from COVID, right? Why did COVID affect more people in the West than did in Africa? Obviously, there was something to do with genomics around it. For example, thank God it did not kill as many Africans as people were saying. People would say, oh gosh, that's the end of Africa. Millions are going to die in Africa. That's it. If it's killing us, it's going to kill 10 times of them because we don't have enough facilities. But it did not because it was the virus responded differently to an Africa genome. And one of the things I wanted to do, I never got to do it, but it's interesting is that, and hopefully we can use AI for this. When I was heading a think tank in Saudi, I said, I would love to do a study on the human genome based on everybody's type, i.e. Caucasian, Asian, African. So we can say what's the most optimal things they should eat, the most optimal vitamins they should take. Now, I thought this would be great to do. I thought maybe someone has done it. I only found out last year that nobody in the world has done this. They've only done it for a small segment of Asian males between 45 and 50. That's it. And I thought, because pharma doesn't care about anybody else. So the idea was, we're going to talk about creating impact. If I could fund a study that says, okay, what's the most optimal treatment protocol for a Nigerian if they get this disease? No one knows. They will just use the same protocol they use for a white male. And it's not going to work because we eat differently. We're in different environment. So that's one study I would love to fund because there's so much stuff we can still get from the world, right? So if I can get that, if we can use AI to just track that and say, okay, what's the most optimal protocol for this kind of person? Should they take 1 Panadol tablet? Should they take 2 Panadol tablets? Should they eat, if they have this problem, should they eat more eba and more jollof rice, or supposed to having potatoes and pizza? Going back to cancer, why is cancer going up a lot in Africa? Cancer kills more people than HIV, malaria, and TB already in Africa. I'm not sure if you know that. We already know that. Why? Yeah. Because when Africans become wealthier, they begin to imitate Western diet. That's the problem. They start to eat pizzas and burgers. Now, pizza and burgers fine if you live in winter in Germany where it's -5 and your body needs a lot of carbohydrates to keep yourself warm. But if it's 30 degrees and you're eating the pizza and you're sitting down at home not doing anything, you're going to get diabetes and you're going to get cancer. So that's why it's going up, because Africans begin to imitate Western lifestyle. And that lifestyle is not designed for their context and for the environment. And that's why they're having more diseases. Use AI for all these different things. Also, we can use AI, for example, for food security. I met a guy in Morocco who came up with this fantastic tool. I think he even did it for Nigeria and Morocco, where they can use AI to track different land in the whole country. What's the most, check this out, the most optimal crop to grow on this patch, and I will also generate the most money for the farmer. He's done the study, but he doesn't have enough money to do it for the whole of Africa. Now, he approached the company. The company said, oh, I want the IP. He said, no. I'm not doing this to become rich. I don't want to become a multimillionaire. I want Africans to have this data so they know how to grow the most optimal. You can't find anybody that wants that. Most companies want to buy it for themselves and sell it and make money from it. So whereas he's used AI for that, and that's a fantastic tool. So we can use AI to fight food security, health. We can even use it now for tracking natural disasters. When I was working at the think tank in Saudi, I came across a company that pitched to us. They found a way to use it for tracking disasters. So for example, if you know that in 6 months' time, there's going to be a flood in this village, you can, one, invest to mitigate that, or tell the villagers, you need to move from there, because if you don't move from there, you're all going to die. Yeah, exactly. So I think that there's a lot of really good things that AI can be used for, but sadly, what's getting the headlines is that this concept of building agentic AI or robots to replace humans, which someone has already said in the history of the world, if unemployment reaches 20%, there's going to be revolution. That's economic history. Someone has already said that. An expert said that if no economy has ever reached 20% of males, and there's not some kind of riot, because 20% of people unemployed is a disaster. Like, I think I'm not sure if it was Western economies, but they already said if AI does this is going to be a disaster. There's going to be a problem economically and socially.
We can only wait and see. And of course, a very big thank you to you for plugging in our affiliate partners. Gamma actually are an affiliate partner to this podcast. And of course, so they're one of our recommended tool sets. So when you look at the description of the podcast, you always see, Kingdom's podcast /tools. We have, our recommended tools on the website, and Gamma is one of them. We use Gamma for our presentations, our podcast questions, guidelines, like what I said to you, right? Our proposals, everything. Like Gamma is PowerPoint on steroids. That's what I call it.
No, it's a fantastic tool. I'm going to deny you using it, because I used to struggle a lot with PowerPoint, to do nice PowerPoint, spend 3-4 hours, and gosh.
Well, no, just plug it into Gamma. And the interesting thing is, Gamma allows you to export your outputs in PDF and PowerPoint as a link. You can use it to create websites, even as images. You can generate images with Gamma. Come on, Gamma. Like, guys, start using Gamma. I wonder why not everybody's using Gamma, but I can't preach about Gamma enough. I cannot preach enough about Gamma. And I think, before I hit the quick fire round, which is 5 questions, 5 quick answers, we have a tradition on the podcast. So you tell me at least one person whose body of work you respect, you admire, that you would like to invite on the podcast. So who is that person whose body of work you respect, you admire, highly resourceful, and you think will be a good fit for the podcast? Let us know, and let's invite that person on the spot. So who would that be for you?
I think it depends on what area that you're looking at. So if you're looking at, someone that's trying to build one of the largest fintechs in Africa, a young African guy in Ghana that I mentor, then I can give you a name. You're looking at someone you want to understand more about AI and blockchain. I can give you my best friend from university. We studied economics at university. He's now head of blockchain at Vodafone UK. So he'd be good. If you're looking at someone that's looking at the concept of AI and the environment. I know another friend, someone that is also looking at investing in startups across Africa and across Europe, is also African. I can give you a name. I
Okay,
think
so
I throw the ball
give us
into
the
your
names.
court.
Give us the names, Chris. You just mentioned these guys and you respect their body of work, basically. Yeah, so yeah, let us have the names and
Should
we
I
are
send that to you by
yeah, you can
email?
say yeah, you can send that via email. You can mention their names, like let them know
Yeah, so
something is coming
there's
for them.
David Palmer. Yeah, so David Palmer is head of blockchain at Vodafone UK. He's really big on AI, blockchain, future of tech. Eid is founder of something called Rebalance Earth, also based in the UK, looking at the concept of using Internet of Things and AI for preservation of the environment. He's doing a lot of work in the UK. Hamid is really great. He's got his own VC looking at investing in health tech and also do some work in Africa. Mubarak is trying to build basically an Islamic version of Revolut. He's from Ghana. I think he's about 30. Yeah, he's about 30 years old. So I mentor him. I'm a strategic board advisor for him, and he's making a lot of headway. I think he's even got interest from, what's that famous actor's name now? The Ghanaian guy, American guy. I could see his face, but they wanted me to be James Bond. Idris Elba. Idris Elba is
Oh,
really interested in his
he's
company,
Sierra Leonean.
investing in this company.
Idris
Yeah,
Elba
Sierra
is
Leone.
actually
Yeah,
Sierra
Sierra
Leonean.
Leone.
I had him on my mind, but when you said Ghanaian guy, I was like, okay. But I think it
Yeah,
sounds
so
like something he would be interested
he set up his investment company in Ghana. That's why. Set up his investment company in Ghana. That's why. Yeah.
in. Interesting.
So those are the I think that's 4 names I've given you: Hamid,
Okay.
David, Walid, and Mubarak.
Amazing. We'll
If
connect
you
with
want to
them on
understand,
LinkedIn.
yeah. So I'll send you their full name and their LinkedIn, and then mention me. Yeah.
Okay, amazing stuff. So are you ready to rumble? 5 questions, 5 quick answers. Are
Okay.
you ready? Okay.
Okay.
Number 1 question is, what is one belief you changed your mind about? What is one belief you previously held but changed your mind about?
You need to be 100% ready before you start anything.
I like that. Being in entrepreneurship, you learn that very fast. You need to iterate.
Yeah.
So when people ask me, are you
Yeah.
ready? Do you know the response I tell them? Whenever people ask me, are you
Yeah.
ready? I tell them, I was born ready.
Okay.
So I love that. So number 2 question is, what is the best piece of advice you have ever received? What is the best piece of advice that you have ever received?
I think my dad used to say, if you're not going to do anything properly, then don't do it.
I tell people that same thing in a different way. I'm like, what doing at all is what doing well. If you know you're not going to do it well, then please do not even attempt it. I don't like half-baked, activities. Either you do it well or you don't.
Yeah.
Now, number 3
Yeah.
is, what is one book that has transformed the way that you think?
Obviously, as a Muslim, the Quran is definitely an important book in my life that I read every day. So it affects everything that I do and the way that I approach the world. If people find that a little bit intimidating, I have to confess that one book that helped me a lot on one of my journeys is Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. Now, people look at that book and think, why? I don't want to be rich. But when you open the book, what blew my mind away is that it's not about becoming rich. It's about mindset and perseverance and believing in yourself and self-fulfillment and faith and perseverance. So I find a lot of things in that book that I could relate to me spiritually and also to my faith in that book, that had like a practical guide about different things. Like even how to pray. It says, for example, don't pray if you don't believe it's going to happen. Of course, he uses the word infinite intelligence, and we now know infinite intelligence basically means God. So basically, he talked about how to communicate directly with that, and also how it relates to your subconscious and auto-suggestion, which are also elements that I also find in my faith as well. So I think if that would be the one book that I would say outside of, countless religious book that I've read, that if something that I would say, just read the book. Don't be scared by the title. It even says in the book, people don't buy books, they buy titles. And I think that's why he called his book Think and Grow Rich, because people were like, oh, I want to be rich. And he just said, if he called it another title, no one would have bought the book. So he even says that in the book about about the title of his book. It talks about everything about human psychology, about the brain, about how the most important thing on the planet you should protect is your brain, because it's the most important asset that you have. And everybody in the future is going to fight to control your brain and influence you, which is it's such a forward-looking book.
It's happening.
What's scary is that all the stuff he warns people about is happening today. About this should not happen. He envisioned the future. We talked about this earlier on, where bosses will be a lot more human and a lot more friendly to their staff. Hopefully that will come soon. That will come soon.
We cannot wait. Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. I have something interesting to tell you, right? And I've said this on the podcast, many episodes of the podcast. That book was the very first book that my father gifted me as a person. And that is,
wow,
one book that has really influenced me and my mindset as a person. Oh, I appreciate that. I appreciate that one. Wow. So, number 4, what is one habit that you would say has contributed significantly, or if you will, the habit that has contributed the most to your success?
Again, I have to say it relates to faith, and I think it's just being the concept of contentment. So starting off my day, first of all, definitely in prayer. So I don't open my phone, or I don't look at my phone or anything like that. I think if you just start your day in a completely different headspace, connecting to something that's bigger than you, and make sure that that's how you start every day, I'm not saying you won't have any challenges throughout your day, but at least it kind of grounds you, and you just think, okay, there's other things that are worth fighting for, and what is really valuable for me, what's valuable for my future life, what's valuable for me after my life, for example, because obviously I believe in God and I believe in afterlife. I think that's a habit that I also have one habit a day, and everything that I would hang on to that habit. I always believe the concept of contentment, because I'm not in this favor of this world of your purpose in life is to be happy, because I think that contentment means that you understand with humility that not everything is down to you. You have to approach life like, okay, if that happens, good. If it don't happen, fine. Maybe there was something else that will happen. Sometimes you find out later on in life, it's a good thing I didn't take that job. It's a good thing I didn't marry that person, because that would have been a disaster for me, right? And I think I always tell people, just try and be content. Just be satisfied with what you have, because if you look down at other people, there are other people that don't have even 1,000 of what you have. So just be grateful, and always be looking up and saying, oh, I want to be a millionaire, I want to be a billionaire. Just being content with what you have, I think will bring a lot of peace.
Chester, I think now you're validating my statement, because remember at the beginning of the podcast, I told you from what I have identified about you from my research, one thing I can pin is the fact that you are one of those unusual people. I am one of them as well. That is why I'm able to identify people like that. You're very unusual in this world, who are able to combine being ambitious and being content. It's a difficult balance to achieve, and I appreciate very much that you are somebody who has been able to demonstrate it. You don't need to tell me. Maybe you might need to tell the world, but you don't need to tell me. I see it. I see it right through it. That contentment and ambition, balance, and it is rare. So you might want to take that as a compliment.
Thanks, love.
The very last question is, complete this sentence. The future belongs to leaders who dash. So the future belongs to leaders who do.
Who love others more than they love themselves.
Yeah. Frame it. Who lead with love? Yeah, I think. Yeah, I frame it that way.
And live with sincere love, because I think you have to be sincere in your love.
Wow, amazing.
I think there's lots of things I can say. Integrity, yeah. I love integrity as well.
Amazing. And finally, we come to the end of the podcast, right? So, do you have any parting words, any final words for the audience? The audience is primarily comprised of career professionals and business leaders, basically. So, any final word before the man, the myth, and the legend takes his lead?
I really believe that everybody's more than the work that they do. So they should really find time in their day and in their week to plug in to who they really are and make sure that they keep that fire alive within themselves to engage with the person that they are and that they want to be outside of work and outside of other commitments. Don't get me wrong, there's some entrepreneurs that are doing life's work, but I think you need to have engagement with the core of who you are as well.
Wow. Thank you very much.
Don't
You know, I always say this, anytime a person shares a time with you, they're sharing their life with you because the SI unit for measuring life is time. So from me to you, it's a very, very big thank you. And of course, I feel like words are insufficient to express, the profound gratitude that I have, for you spending your time and your life today. And of course, it has been a masterclass in clarity, in courage, in transformation, in service. And of course, your story actually reminds us that titles may open doors, but impact is built through character, through execution, and the courage to serve something bigger than yourself. So from me to you, Lameen Abdul-Malik, it's a very big thank you once again. And of course, do not think because I'm a Christian, I don't know the meaning of your name. Abdul-Malik is Allah the King, right? And, the King is now on the
yes.
Kingdoms podcast. You are on the Kingdoms podcast for a reason.
Yeah, Abdul-Malik means servant of the king. Yeah, Abdul means
Yeah,
servant, and Malik
yeah.
means king. That's right.
Yeah, I got it right. And of course, to the audience, always go for something in your lives. Conceive, believe, strive to thrive and achieve. And of course, guys, you know the right thing to do. Please like, share, comment, subscribe. Importantly, share it with your network. Like, come on, sharing is caring and lead with love. And, do the needful. Till I come your way again, it is goodbye from me. And of course, it's goodbye from Lameen Abdul-Malik, the man, the myth, and the legend.
Thanks a lot.